Hey guys, God bless, and welcome back to another episode of Biblical Studies, episode 5, I believe. And on today's episode, now that we are done exploring the angels of heaven and, doing all that fun stuff, with Michael, Gabriel, and whatnot, we're going to be looking more into other parts of the Bible not fully known about. And I want to start it off with talking about the man named Enoch today, whose scripture said walked with God, and that his walk with God was so strong or so close and intimate, he basically never died. Okay, wait, let me explain. He's not walking the earth now. It's more like God took him away, so he didn't have to experience death like, the rest of us humans do. So it's awfully interesting, and yeah, that's who I want to talk about with you guys today. And as usual, I will be going through all the times Enoch was mentioned in the Bible and reading all the verses he was mentioned so we can get a better understanding of who this man was. So, with that being said, Enoch was first mentioned in the book of Genesis 5, verse 22, and it says, "And Enoch walked with God, after he begat Methuselah." Sorry, I'm really bad at names, but that's his son. 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Okay, so the verse I just read is like super mysterious, but it's like super like fascinating as well. Like the whole "he was not, for God took him." And it's basically interesting in that this is the only mention of Enoch. I mean, he's mentioned in other verses, like, we're gonna read, but this was his introduction into the Bible, and at the same time, it was his end of his life. It goes through his entire life pretty quick. All we know is that he had his son, and after he goes and starts to walk with God, have this really close relationship. He has other kids, but then he was taken away from life when he was at the age of 365 years old. And okay, side note, I know it sounds weird that he lived that long, but back in early mankind, after Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, mankind lived up to like 900 years old, probably because they were closer to physical perfection. And it sounds a lot to us now, but, considering that mankind was originally meant to be like immortal, it's, not that much, I guess, when you're looking at through the grand scale of things. It's also, as time passed, sin became more prominent in the early people, and so that's why, lifespans got super short as the Bible progresses, because the more sin there is, the less people live. So, that's why we die in like around our 90s or 80s or 70s. And that's just an interesting thing to know. So it's also funny to think that Enoch was probably one of the young ones who like left. He was like 300, but it's like it's just a trip, honestly. And really, what's something that like something I really wish the Bible would delve more into is that is Enoch's walk with God, because that's honestly like the most important thing about him, is that he had this close, intimate relationship with God, but we don't really know much about Enoch. We just know that it just skims through his entire life, all 300 years of it, as he had kids, he walked with God, bam, he's gone, And it's just so interesting in what Enoch did. We don't really know, because God loved Enoch so much, he just didn't want him to die, so he probably just took him away so he didn't have to face death. And I know, and we do know he fully died, because in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 15, it says that by faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. So, this book translation, like, like, honestly, this verse, like, confirms that he didn't die. And it's interesting that the wording they use is translation, like, he was translated, I guess, from this world into the next, into a better place, and that he had this testimony. And usually a testimony when regarding, the Bible or Christianity is sometimes like, a testimony would be like, if I gave my testimony and how I found God, like we knew that Enoch had one that God loved, and whatever it was, it must have been something amazing, because, the Bible never really sheds light on what Enoch did. And, it's just so fascinating to think he never died. He's like, this only happened 2 times in the Bible. First guy being Enoch, and the second man to never die was the prophet Elijah, but that's another story entirely. I don't know, Enoch is just an interesting person, and it's really a shame that the Bible doesn't really explore or go more into detail about him or his life. We get snippets of it, but we never really see the full picture, the full story. One of the snippets being that Enoch was obviously a prophet, and he was a preacher, because in the book of Jude, the second to last book in the Bible, chapter 1, verses 14 to 16, this is the only time it has direct words from Enoch, and so he's speaking a warning about coming dangers, assumingly to the sinful people of his time. He says, "And Enoch also, the 7th from Adam, prophesied of these things, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches, which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. These murmurers, complainers, walkers after their own lust, and their mouth speaketh great swelling words, having men's persons and administration because of advantage." That's interesting. That's like the only time Enoch ever spoke, at least the Bible records, those were his words. And like most prophets in the Bible, if you read the Bible, like God usually sends them to go to talk to sinful people and like give these like prophecies about warnings. And here we don't really know who Enoch was speaking to, but we're assuming that it was like, early mankind, because people had long lifespans, and the world was being populated, obviously. So Enoch probably was called by God to go around and warn people. Like, whatever he was warning them for, it's interesting, because he talks about the 10,000 saints. And, some people think it's about the flood, which happened like, a long time ago. A long time, obviously, sorry, I'm lost right now, but, yeah, basically that. But yeah, and it's really interesting, because we know that, well, these are the only 2 Bible verses that really shed light on Enoch and his character. As I've said already, all we know about Enoch is that he was like an amazing guy, and we'll never really know what he did that made God so happy. But we can only guess, because there is a book of Enoch, but hear me out on this. The book of Enoch is not in the Bible. It's like this separate source. I've read it myself. I found it in these books called the Lost Books of the Bible, quote unquote. And, it's interesting, like the book of Adam and Eve, or the book of this guy and that guy, and it's interesting to read, and if you do happen to like search it for yourself, I would warn you not to take it fully in account, because these books aren't in the Bible, and some of the information in them can be quite very it can what's the word I'm looking for? It can contradict, contradict words in the Bible, other sayings, and other verses in the Bible. But, reading it, it is interesting that, to learn about Enoch, because the Bible, like I said, like this entire series, Biblical Studies, has basically just been exploring stuff in the Bible that's mentioned but never really explored. Like we talked about the seraphim, or we talked about Gabriel and Michael, and, we have very little knowledge about them. They're only mentioned like a couple verses, or they have like prophecies and stuff to say, and then they just go away, and then the Bible just continues on. And so it's sometimes infuriating just because you want to learn more, but you can't really learn much about them. So I don't know. Enoch's like one of those people because, basically whatever he did was amazing. And probably Enoch most likely had a very strong like desire, obviously, to seek God. Because remember that Enoch, even though he was the seventh from Adam, the first man, like, it's still really interesting because they lived at the same time, because Adam lived to be 930 years old. So, like, who knows, maybe Enoch, like, spoke with Adam, or maybe Enoch just had something in him that no other human being had, a true desire to walk with God. And it really shows because Enoch's children, basically his son, lived to be the oldest living man in the Bible, 969 years old, and his grandson Noah, we all know about Noah and his ark. Noah was another person in the Bible mentioned to walk with God. And so really a walk with God is, what we can take from Enoch is that a walk with God is really a fulfilling thing. I'm not saying that if you have a close relationship with God, you'll avoid death. Don't get me wrong on that, but, there are great things to be achieved. And, a great way, in case you're wondering how you would walk with God, is, mainly, sorry, I'm lost right now. I'm kind of talking at the top of my head. I don't really write scripts for these things, so like, I'm always just going off the top of my head. But yeah, the real way you would form a relationship with God is, first of all, reading the Bible. Because when you read the Bible, it's kind of like God's way of talking with you. The Bible is the Word of God, and when you read it, you'll always get something new. You could probably read the same thing over and over, and you'll always get something new out of it. It's an interesting book. I know I've read it plenty of times, and I'm always learning new things or discovering new things in the same chapters I read. And, prayer is a huge, huge part on forming a walk with God. A walk with God, it's not literally, oh, I'm going to go, like, I don't know, walk around the neighborhood with God, or amen. So, but, it's like, it's more like a close relationship, like something more deep and intimate. And prayer is talking with God. It's like, if you, like talking to a friend, the way I'm talking to you, if you pray to God, that would be like talking to him. And then fasting's a huge part, because fasting, when most people think about fasting, it's not, they usually think about like food, because like fasting is a spiritual thing in which you go without food for a while, for holy reasons. Like Jesus went 40 days without food. That was fasting. I'm not saying you have to go 40 days. That's it. But fasting can be more than just food. Fasting is kind of like, giving up something you love to show a holy devotion to God for a certain period, whether it be a day or 40 days, for a month or two. So, if you really love video gaming or Instagram, you could always fast that, like, oh, I won't use it today or one day, I might fast YouTube because I really love my YouTube. And, fasting, praying, Bible reading, and another huge ingredient in forming a close relationship with God would be going to church, because a lot of people underestimate the importance of church. But in the Bible it says, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves, and that's basically like, the people of God. And to think you can have a close relationship with God without going to church is not really a good mindset to be in. It's actually a really scary one to be in, to think that. because you need the church, and the church is something you should be at. It's where you commune with fellow followers, like-minded individuals. It's kind of like you go into the world, high school, jobs, that's ungodly, and then you have to put up with it trying to be a godly person. So church, I'm going to try to use this as an analogy. It's kind of like a gas station. You get to hear the words of the preacher, the man of God, the angel of God, and you have to get yourself in a spiritual mindset again, be reminded, and then you'll have enough strength to face another week or another couple of days and then go back to church and, kind of restart the cycle. It's a good thing to have. And so, like Enoch is like an example of, having a close walk with God, and a very intimate one at that. And, if you just read the Bible, if you pray, if you fast, you go to church, I'm not saying you'll avoid death like Enoch, but you'll definitely have a close relationship with God. And I think Enoch had this enlightenment in that, he sought God with all his heart, and, he wanted to find God, and when he found God, he wanted to never let go. I feel like this is something that Enoch had that the other people around him didn't. Because after Adam fell, like the first man, we never really get an impression that he tried to fully restore what he lost with God, or, try to seek God. But Enoch, he had faith, and he didn't walk in the Garden of Eden or in the direct presence of God like Adam did, but yet he had this strong faith and this strong devotion and hunger. And Enoch can be like a huge, motivator, a huge goal to get to, in a sense that, you can look at him and say, you know what, if you go with God, if you look for this deeper, more intimate and close relationship, you can achieve something great, whether it be in this life or in the next life, So that's really it, guys. I wish there was more to delve more into with Enoch, but for the most part, that's his story. That's, he's a man who walked with God, and God took him. It's simple, but there's a lot of power and a lot of deeper meaning behind Enoch, and just that one sentence he's mentioned in it carries so much importance and so much power in it. So, I hope this video helped a little, and yeah, have a nice rest of your day, everyone. God bless, and I guess I'll see you next Sunday. Bye.